Good afternoon to you all and welcome to What's the Vibe News with myself, Mrs. Tudeti, our economic guru.
Aaron Masamola.
And?
Lennox Osara.
How are you today, gentlemen?
We're doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad.
Good. Did you see the Notre Dame cathedral fire that happened just yesterday?
Yes, it's been mentioned pretty much all over the news.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts on that?
It's quite sad, I have to admit, given the fact that it's such an historic building that holds so much history for the French capital in Paris. So it's quite sad, and I hope that hopefully that building can be restored.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also see that some of the presidents have also come out and said some statements. Well, specifically Donald Trump has come out and shared his expressions about how he felt. But everybody's certainly sad about the events.
Yeah, I'm actually not particularly sure whether anybody was in the building, but it's quite a tragic event. In today's show, we're going to debunk the testimony of yet another witness at the Zondo Commission into state capture. The testimony is of former Independent Police Investigative Directorate Head Robert McBride, and we're going to talk about a follow-up of the Alexandra protests. Aaron, do tell us what we'll be talking about in economics today.
Today on the economics segment, we are talking about you and I as consumers that may continue to struggle during these tough economic times, as the Automobile Association warns of yet another fuel price increase that is set to kick in May. And then we also talk about the rand that is quite strong at this point in time, given the strong start that it had in early trade on Tuesday. And lastly, we finish off by a story that has been seen on social media with regards to Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram being down for quite some time. And then we discuss some of the economical impacts that this may have on you and I.
Before we get into that, let's see what else has been happening around the country. The sudden burst of violent protests in Cape Town and Johannesburg townships are the result of genuine service delivery issues and are not politically motivated. Political analyst Ralph Mateja says this in response to a week of protests that resulted in the burning and looting of businesses in Khayelitsha, Blackheath and Strand. Mateja said the action was sparked by local concerns instigated by real issues including service delivery. The trigger point is service delivery based on bread and butter issues in which many communities filed themselves in, Mateja added. Last week, angry residents blocked roads in Khayelitsha, Blackheath and Strand with rubble, burning tires and rocks as they led the shutdown demonstrations. Alexandra residents have prevented Joburg Mayor Herman Mashaba from addressing the Integrated Development Plan session that was meant to take place in the Johannesburg Township last night. Residents gathered at the Marlborough Community Hall but refused to allow the meeting to get underway by continuously singing songs. Gatherers only calmed down when community members handed over a memorandum which demanded services and the removal of informal shacks and illegal land grabs. Residents have told authorities to stop pointing fingers at one another and that they just want service delivery. Since the reading of the memorandum, residents then booed Mayor Mashaba. Some even went to the extent of pelting him and his team with papers and empty water bottles. Finally, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has dismissed former SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane's application to cross-examine Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, finding that his application did not comply with the rules of the State Capture Commission. Gordhan testified at the hearings in November last year, where he provided details of the breakdown of the relationship between him and Moyane, whom he accused of failing to be accountable. Since then, Moyane argued that for the Commission to accept Gordhan's claims, they had to be tested. Zondo discussed the rules of the Commission, which require an implicated party to identify which part of a witness statement they deny or dispute. That was DJ Speedster with Naughty featuring Young Swiss here on Tuxedo 7.2. If you've just joined us, you're still tuned into What's the Vibe News. Today we're looking at the testimony of former Independent Police Investigative Directorate Head Robert McBride. In the past year, McBride was caught in some sticky situations regarding his position at IPID. It was often debated that his appointment as the IPID boss was unethical, as it happened during the former President Jacob Zuma's presidential term. Now, McBride has come forward to testify at the Zondo Commission into state capture taking place in Parktown, Johannesburg. According to reports, the purpose of this testimony is to debunk the reasons which led him to being dismissed and later on reinstated. He also opened up about some of the major cases that the IPID investigated. One of these cases include a rendition case involving former Hawks bosses Anwar Dramat and Shadrack Sibia. In this case, sources revealed that the Hawks had unlawfully arrested a Zimbabwean national and had the case docket prepared by the crime intelligence. According to McBride, this isn't the job of the crime intelligence to carry out dockets and take statements from witnesses. In the midst of all of this, McBride, along with Dramat and Sibia, were apparently falsely accused of impropriety and criminal conduct, which later led to their suspensions. On this note, McBride revealed that former Police Minister Nathi Nhleko had a personal interference with his suspension. Based on the Zimbabwean rendition case, Nhleko called for Werkman's attorneys to investigate the matter. Nhleko instructed McBride to cooperate with the probe, but instead, Nhleko used the investigation report to take action against McBride. In addition to that, lead investigator of the Zimbabwean rendition, Ntumeleng Kuba, was allegedly instructed to falsely implicate McBride. The reason for this was that Kuba had been dismissed, and in order to get his job back, he was allegedly told to make a false statement about McBride. So ultimately, we see some kind of pattern of sabotage with regards to position holders of crime-fighting institutions, I could say, the organizations rather. This could be some kind of defamation of character to some extent. And what are you guys' thoughts on this?
Well, they say you can't fight fire with fire. And essentially what's happening here is that obviously when corruption happens and nobody is accounted to it, and then, nobody takes responsibility for it, it's forced to, you cover it up by more corruption and being more unlawful. And so I guess the more we dig into this, the more unlawful acts will pick up that happened as a result of, these appointments, reinstatements, and getting fired and so forth, and then implicating innocent people to a great extent. So it's certainly a lack of accountability and, just unethical, people not doing their due diligence as well. And it's sad because it's top executives. I mean, the Hawks. I mean,
Yeah.
you would expect that to be the highest moral or ethical, body in the country, considering their role in society.
I think it's also very disappointing, as Lennox does allude to the level of corruption. It seems that as we have more of these inquiries, it seems that we're covering more parts of the state, as well as whether it be the Hawks or other parts of government as well, where you actually see the corruption and the level of corruption. And basically, it almost comes across as though so many people are implicated that we can't trust the people that are sitting in these top positions anymore.
Yeah, and I actually do want to echo what Lennox said basically about, the ripple effect of unlawfulness and corruption, that even the crime intelligence is not even doing their job accordingly. So how are we supposed to know that, such crimes or such illegal situations are controlled accordingly, because now they're not even doing their job in the correct manner. And if there's such sabotage at such a high level, then what happens to the ones at the lower level?
Yeah, absolutely. And the justice system is what makes a country.
Yeah.
And if that's something that we're worried about, then you wonder what's going to happen to the country, because that's the highest place where you go to put these people in their rightful place, which is in prison.
Yeah, and actually there is an article that was circulating that even the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo at the State Commission has also been allegedly been implicated in some kind of saga. I will actually obviously look into that, but I'm going to do a brief follow-up on the Alexandra protest. So yesterday, Johannesburg Mayor Herman Mashaba met with Alexandra residents to discuss their grievances. Well, it turns out that residents weren't really pleased with seeing him. In his address at Alexandra, Mashaba went on to blame the ANC for using, and I quote, poor and vulnerable residents. This tactic of pointing fingers to political parties regarding problems with service delivery has lost its effect to a very, very large extent. And as discussed off air, a voice note that was released by a listener on another radio station stated that Mashaba seems to be like an angry ex-partner who hasn't moved on, as they continuously blame their ex for everything that goes wrong. In reference to this comment, how true do you think this may be?
Absolutely. I think one of the things is that he's actually the mayor of Joburg.
Yeah.
And Alex falls under his, his area of responsibility and all that stuff. So really him blaming is like a really weak move, because it's essentially showing that he probably lacks the leadership we need to move forward, and, always referring to the past. I do understand there's some things that you can't really change overnight, but like people's perceptions can change overnight because they can see that you're working and that you're making a difference in the society as a mayor, and they can feel the difference. And if they can't feel the difference, then essentially, you question their effectiveness in that area.
I fully do agree, especially given what has been happening over the past week, if we can put it that way, because you can't be blaming. I mean, you are the mayor of the city, and if this specific location falls under your jurisdiction, you are the person that is meant to take charge. I mean, the residents, did ask to see him, and they are turning to him because he's somebody who should provide guidance and who should be accountable in terms of delivering services to the people. So him trying to blame shift, especially heading towards election season, I mean, we're 5 weeks roundabout away from elections, and him trying to shift blame is, I feel, a very bad move, and it makes his party look very bad because he's not taking a stand on anything.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I actually don't even think it's just an individual problem. I think it's a whole party problem because he's not the only one that always does this. And I actually do also want to echo the question, do you think that the DA will ever make themselves accountable for service delivery issues?
Oh, actually, just touching on that, I do think that politicians must just get this right. That sometimes you don't always get the governance thing right. And when you're honest with your citizens, 100%. That's actually a powerful move.
That's true.
Because they can relate that, these are human beings and maybe they just didn't get it right this time around. So it's actually a powerful move. It's not a disadvantage. But like when you keep, dancing to the same tune of blame game and all that, then people really can feel that this is more of a front and just want to engage us because of the votes and electoral time. But like, where really, if it's genuine and you're honest, like that was a good opportunity for the DA actually to be honest and be like, you know what, this is one of the areas we've actually failed, and we look to make a difference in the coming period.
Very true. To answer your question, Masesi, this is something that we've spoken about previously, and we'll continue to have that conversation as we head towards election season. And many young people, I have to be honest, have echoed the sentiments that the DA is pointing fingers all the time, even though we understand that the governing party, the ANC, of course, they've fallen short in many areas. But they, at least in my perspective, they aren't taking a stand and letting us know exactly what they're about. For example, like other parties like the EFF and the BLF, they're very clear as to what they stand for, where when I look at the DA, it's almost like they're pointing a lot of fingers and we're not really clear as to what they want to achieve. Yeah,
and I actually have to reiterate on that, saying that I just think it's some kind of insecurity the DA might have. I don't think that they actually ever feel accountable for the problems that they cause, or things going wrong under their books. I think for them, they don't ever see anything wrong that they ever do. And the only time I actually get to understand their policies is actually if you actually are a member, or you go through the websites and you actually see what they stand for, and what they say in public is definitely what is not what stands in their party constitution.
But also, I mean, if you think about it, what type of personalities deny, taking accountability? Usually those arrogant, people that are not willing to exchange ideas with other people, because essentially they believe that they know it all and therefore they can never be wrong. So that's what I might start thinking, because, they've never taken that side of things when it comes to addressing some of these issues.
Yeah, and I actually also think that in order to be successful, you also do need to have some kind of failures. But then again, we don't have control over that. Do share your thoughts on your WhatsApp line, 061-720-1072, or call us on 012-362-1072. After this, we'll be having our economic segment. That is Love Can by Sean Jacobs here on Taxi 7.2. We're now going into our economic segment.
Today on the economic segment, we are talking about the tough times that lie ahead for you and I as consumers, as the Automobile Association warns of yet another fuel price increase that is set to kick in at the start of May. We also talk about the rand. We also talk about the rand strengthening in early trade this morning. And lastly, we discuss Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram being down for the past few days and some of the economic impacts given these few events. Now, looking at the Automobile Association of South Africa, they've come out with a statement simply stating that you and I as consumers will continue to struggle given the fact that given the fact that our economy is experiencing very, very tough times at this point in time, the Automobile Association has mentioned that a litre of petrol could possibly go up by 56 cents next month, and possibly diesel might decrease by 5 cents. The reason for these possible increases is higher international oil prices. Now, given the fact that all of this information continues to overwhelm consumers, we've seen the month of April being a very, very difficult month for you and I as consumers. The Energy Regulator of South Africa has approved the fact that electricity will go up and kicked in this month by 9.4%, as well as the fact that when we started this month, petrol went up by R1.34, as well as diesel went up by diesel went up by 82 cents. And given all of these possible increases, the biggest area where you and I will feel it is in transport cost for our food as well as our personal transportation. The Taxi Association also came out this last week saying that there's a possibility that taxi fares might increase in the month of June and July. Masesi, Lennox, I would love to hear your views on this one. A wave of increases from the fuel price to electricity, and now taxi fares possibly increasing later this year. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's actually quite bizarre, and I think you did mention that the rand is actually kind of strengthened a little bit today. How can that, could there be a possibility that these increases could be affected in the rand, strengthening, so that maybe them not being as drastic?
The thing is, when you look at the currency is very volatile and fluctuates. So the reason why things go up at a significant price level is the fact, as I mentioned earlier, is because of international prices that are very high at the moment, especially when you look at oil prices, because we don't control that at all. True. So if our rand does strengthen, it gives us an opportunity to buy fuel at a lower price. But also these are, you look at two dynamics here. You look at long term as well as short term. In the long term, we do pay a little bit more, but in the short term, things do look good as things stand at the moment. Lennox, your opinion on some of the increases?
Yeah, the increases certainly incentivize people. Like from an economics point of view, you have to really be more frugal in the way you spend and the way you live. But I do think some of these, putting things in perspective, the increase, like you said, is an international phenomenon. Like it's something that's happening from our main suppliers in somewhere in the Middle East. So that itself also doesn't mean that it just affects South Africa. It affects probably the whole continent to a great extent. But also, I'd like to find out, have you ever thought about perhaps, looking, because Nigeria makes a lot of oil, up in the northern Africa, there's a lot of oil there. So, maybe we might have to find a way to, get into agreements, policy-wise, get into agreements with them to get it at a much better price, because I'm sure it must be possible in some way.
It's definitely possible, and it also stems from a conversation we started last week with regards to African nations actually providing for themselves and being able to trade amongst themselves. And I think the oil that we are getting at this point in time does stem from the Middle East, and yes, they do control the oil prices as well. So if we find a possible way of almost negotiating with the Nigerians and buying our oil from there is a possibility that we could get it at a very, very good price. But this is something that we'll have to wait and see as to whether South Africa is able to have those negotiations with Nigeria. But continuing that conversation, looking at the rand, as Masesi mentioned that the rand did strengthen. The rand is currently doing quite well in early trade on Tuesday. The rand is currently trading at 14 rand 6 cents to the dollar, 15 rand 89 cents to the euro, and 18 rand 39 cents to the pound sterling. Now, given the fact that the markets are stabilizing slowly but surely, given that fact, we are just about 4 weeks away from the elections, and Cyril Ramaphosa mentioning that he is for the economy and possibly growing the economy. We will have to wait and see if the rand will continue to strengthen, because over the past few weeks things have been looking quite good for the rand. Lastly, we move on to Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram being down this past week. Now, the group of companies that has been owned by Facebook over the past few years, being WhatsApp and Instagram, were reportedly down this past week. And on Twitter, we saw a lot of hashtags actually moving around with regards to hashtag WhatsApp down, hashtag Instagram down, and hashtag Facebook down. And the Facebook group didn't actually come out and give an immediate statement as to why this happened, but we have seen various platforms internationally also being down. In the UAE, the national report was also down, as well as in the UK, the Mirror. That website was also down, and a lot of consumers as well as users of these platforms did turn to Twitter to express their concerns. Now, some of the economic impact when you look at a large part of our social media platforms being down is, firstly, one of the biggest talking points is the democratization of information. And basically what that means is that once these platforms do go down, it means that you and I won't be able to share information at the fast pace that we have been previously been able to do so, as well as other economic platforms that share information that is immensely important to our day-to-day lives, especially given the fact that information being shared is a very, very big part of how we run the economy. But Masesi, Lennox, I'd love to hear your views. What are your thoughts just as a user of these social media platforms and them being down over the past few days?
Normally, it doesn't actually really affect me to a large extent. However, the day that it was actually down, it was when I actually needed it the most. I needed to communicate, to actually get some schoolwork done. So I think it was, quite daunting. And I really wish there was some kind of alternative to communicate with the people I needed to do work with.
Absolutely. One thing that I've thought about in the recent past is that social media is very powerful. There's over 1 billion people on these platforms. It's a way of communication, staying in touch with everybody. But what happens, though, is that I fear what's going to happen in the future when, these people use these platforms as a way to limit information and to limit people from being activists and taking action against politicians. Because, Zimbabwe is a great example of that, where social media was cut off, the internet was cut off, and obviously people lost touch, but it has a serious impact on people. And then also from an economic sense, if Instagram is looking at having online shop with their platform, and if it's not working, every minute you're down, you're losing money. But I'm curious to find out what is the main reason they shut it down. Is it upgrades or what is it?
I possibly don't know, because they haven't come out with a clear statement as to why it was down over the past few days. But in terms of the economic impact, it's very, very true what you're saying, because firstly, we deal in an economy where we share information, and that's the biggest selling point, is we sell information on the internet. But besides that, we sell goods and services on the internet as well. And these platforms being down is not just an inconvenience to you and I as users, but it's also an inconvenience to a growing economy as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for tuning in. Catch us on What's the Vibe News team again next week, same time on Tuks FM 107.2. It is now time for your news.